Hello, everybody. Welcome to PowerShell Wednesdays. It's Wednesday. It's 2 p.m. Eastern. That means we're meeting to talk, to learn, to grow, to thrive, to reach our next level. And this week we have lightning demos. That means it's fast. You're going to learn a lot of things in a short period of time. If something sticks out to you, write it down, dive deeper.
Hello.
Welcome to PowerShell Wednesday. This is your second time doing a lightning demo. We tried doing a podcast earlier. The internet gods were against us. I was strucketh down, but we get to see some code anyways.
Sure. We can just do some PowerShell stuff and don't worry about the internet. And I think this should work out. What I want to show you today is calculated properties. So this is more of a beginner topic, but I think a few people don't know about it, and it's really cool stuff. So generally, I think most of you are aware you can, when you run a commandlet and get some objects back, then you get like a default view of the properties back. And so in this case, I ran get service and I'm getting status, name, and display name back. And if you want some other properties, you could use select object and then say, for example, I just want name and status. And actually, I'll just do this first 5. So I see just 5 and it's a bit easier and I don't have to scroll that much. But this is what I want to talk about, the selection of the properties. And with these, you are still on the standard path. But with calculated properties, you can do cool stuff like you can rename properties, or you can format them differently, or you can even create completely new properties. And that's actually what I did before I knew about PS custom objects. So cool stuff. And for example, if you think this default name to rename it, for example, to service status, then you can use a calculated property. And to do that, I will just remove the status here. And instead of the name of a normal property, I'll put in a hash table. And that hash table takes 2 key value pairs. One is called name, which is, I think, kind of self-explanatory. It's the name of the new property that you want to create. For example, service name. And then you add an expression, and that is also in curly braces. So it's a bit chaotic here on the screen, lots of braces. But here we can just put in some PowerShell code that gets executed. And I put in service name. I wanted to put service status. Sorry about that. And here I'll just put in $_.status. And let's run that again. And we just renamed the property without creating any new objects, any new object types, stuff like that. So that's an easy thing you can do. If you want to rename your properties, for example, if you want to export them into a CSV file or something like that, and you're not happy with the default names. And one thing that I also, I think that's one of the first occasions where I saw it was in Exchange. So I'm actually on an Exchange server right now. And maybe if you worked with Exchange, be it Exchange Server or Exchange Online, you maybe want to get a list of the email addresses of a user. And right here in the PowerShell console or in the ISE, it looks fine. I'll just get all the email addresses here. It's because I'm zoomed in, I can't really see all of them, but it looks like they are there. And so I could just try to export them into a CSV file with export CSV. But when we look into this file, then we see the addresses are not listed here. So instead of, I'll just get the name, the object type here. And that's a bit of a bummer. And one thing that we can do to fix it is using calculated properties again. And I put the example code for that already in here. So I'm again just running get mailbox. And then one of the properties that I create here is called email addresses. So same name as the original property name, but the code that gets executed here is just taking the array, the list of the email addresses, and joins them with the -join parameter, and then exports them again. So let's try that, and let's look into the file again. And now we got all the addresses here. I'll zoom in a bit. I mean, there's still stuff we could do, like removing the prefixes here if we want to, but just like a simple thing how you can retrieve arrays or stuff like that. So that's like the basics of calculated properties. I could go on, but I don't know. I don't want to keep it for too long.
I think that was lightning, but I'll say calculated properties are huge. These are just a couple of ways you can use them. The fact that you can execute PowerShell code and that expression part means you can pretty much do whatever. If like one command doesn't have all the details you need, you can query another command inside of that calculated property thing. So tons of power there. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure, you're welcome.
All right. Who is next in our group here? I see Morton, you have your screen up. I'll add you. Morton Minster. We know you.
Hello.
Welcome.
Should we just, thank you. Should we just get started?
Yeah, tell us what you're talking about.
You might need to correct the screen.
Boom, bingo, bongo.
Thank you. Recently, Just Leaving reached out on LinkedIn asking the community if somebody had another way of getting the spot prices for VMs, because he found out the API lied, or the retail API at least. Currently, the Microsoft Docs linked here. I'll also throw in a link to the GitHub where you can find this after the show. But either way, the documentation refers to the retail API, so this one. And if we take a look at the API, which is here, we can see that it has all of the Azure resources available within it to list all prices for the different resources that you can deploy to Azure. Unfortunately, for some reason, something like sizes on VMs in Azure, the price is incorrect. It says the retail price is $0.272 US dollars per hour of compute. Unfortunately, that is not correct. And if we have a look at the other link that Just Leaving also mentioned in one of his posts, this one to be particular, he also shows off that he already had a script where he's already mentioning that he's looking at this endpoint instead, which is the same endpoint that the Azure portal uses when it has to get the prices of VMs or spot prices of VMs, as the spot pricing parameter on the query parameter on the URL is set to true, which does return the correct price, but it is a bit of a hassle to get the correct price, as you would need code like this to actually get it. So I had a look at it, and what I found at least, and I'll just show it in the GUI as well. We have our developer console open to the right, and I'll zoom on it when we need to look at it. But let's just try and create a VM. The good old GUI way. And just a subscription. Set the one with Azure Spot discount to true. And for good measure, let's try and select the same one that I have an example for. Unfortunately, the API only shows up to version 5. Currently, I'm working on version 6 of the pricing model. So I can't see the correct price for version 5, but for version 6, I have it here. And now if we pop this one out, and I'm unsure if we can zoom, then what we'll be looking at is the network pane, the fetch HXR, and the first thing we'll find is the same URL that Just Lieben was mentioning, the get spec prices, which points to this URL, which is a backend API that Azure uses or that Microsoft uses. And we can also see the preview, which has the size that we actually selected. Other than that, it will also have the per unit amount cost, which in this case is $0.0234 US. And this is always calculated in hours of compute. So this is for 1 hour. Looking around this particular one, because normally when Azure tries to request data to show you in the GUI, they will batch the request to get multiple results back. And on this request, you can see it hits a management REST API in the Azure backend. It uses batch request. And if we look at the payload, we can see our request. And let me just expand this one a bit. The first thing we can see is that it is looking at some resource groups, some automation, which is presumably what we were selecting at the top. The second one is also that one. I might be looking in the wrong place. Let me just have a look. Bam, 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 bam. It might actually be this one I was looking for. It was not. Oh, damn. The demo guards was not with me today. I did this one earlier as well, just to make sure. Bam, 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 bam. Here we are. It's because it had to get spec prices for some reason, or get spec cost. We already requested the content from up here, and the URL is this batch at API version something. In the payload, we can see which URL endpoint it tries to hit. In this case, it's Microsoft.resource graph. And within the resource graph, it is running this query. So spot resources, new line, where type Microsoft Compute, and a table called SKU spot eviction rate. Now, I had never heard of it, so let's just try and go to the Resource Graph Explorer in Azure. Within this one, you have the different categories, but we also have specific tables, which might not be shown in the categories field. And then we have to look for the spot resources. And in this section, we can see that we have a Microsoft Compute SKU alternative spot VM sizes, SKU spot eviction rate, which is the one we hit with the API. But we also have the SKU spot pricing history. And if we wanted to run this one, we would get all of the prices for all the VM sizes on different locations, both for Windows and for Linux. Bam, 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 bam. And just to show a singular one, we have a Brazil Southeast and of the type A10, and we're looking at Linux. And the effective cost is 0.017, yada yada. And if we try to look at the specific one, so for reference, just the D2 DS V5, we could run something like, let me just see if I included it, something like this. Then we would be returned with 2 entries. One is for Linux, and the pricing for VMware, as long as you are using hybrid benefit, would always be of the type Linux. That's how that is calculated on Microsoft's end. And then we also have our spot prices history. And the history will always have at least 1 entry if it has a spot price at all. But it can also have multiple entries like this one. And you will always have to take the latest entry to get the actual price of the spot VM or spot size. And you would also have to make sure that if you don't use hybrid benefit and need to use Windows, you have to look on the Windows kind, which will be a bit more expensive than the Linux kind. Another thing is that Jaslepen also shared his solution, which I have a link to here. It is also linked in the complete repo. But going from, let me just see where I had the other piece of code. I have too many browsers open. This is the new one, and this is the old one. So just had the honor of trying it out himself. I only confirmed one instance where it was correct in regards to the same API he was using, the backend API that Azure is also using, or Microsoft is also using, and going over to this. So it's just to show you that even though they only show you one piece of the puzzle, if you dig a bit around the same area where you get something other data that is related to what you're working on, you can sometimes track your way to information that isn't actually shown in the queries. That's about it. Hope I didn't take up too much time.
No, I mean, I think it's kind of wild that you need to be able to be familiar with dev tools to be able to be like a current administrator of cloud stuff, but it seems like it's becoming more and more of a sort of required skill.
It seems like it, yeah. But I mean, it's a great tool once you learn it.
Absolutely. And knowing when you can dig deeper, because that doesn't just apply to Azure, like kind of figuring out the API endpoints that exist that aren't visible to you, but still very much return data is always going to be a good thing. So thank you for sharing that with us, Morten.
You're welcome.
Next up, we have, you know him, you love him, Silbert Ganchez, also known as Gilbert Sanchez. I didn't tell you were next, but you were in fact next. Welcome, Gilbert. How are you?
You didn't warn me.
No.
Good thing I wasn't picking my nose.
Big
All right.
mid-pick.
I'll try to be quick-ish. So today I'm going to give you guys a lightning demo on the PowerShell localization VS Code extension. So in case you guys don't know who I am, I'm Gilbert Sanchez. I'm also known as Hey It's Gilbert. You can find my links at links.gilbertsanchez.com. You probably don't care about that stuff. So what is the PowerShell localization extension? It is an extension that I built that allows you to render inline what the value of your localized text looks like. At the end, we're going to do a little demo. I'll do the demo in a few seconds, and I'll kind of show you guys how that works. Another nice thing which does not render well right here is that there's commands to switch between the UI cultures. So if you are looking at English, but you want to switch to maybe you have a Spanish one, you can switch that. And then I'll talk about that stuff in a second when I do the demo. So real quick, like, why did I build this, right? My English is okay, it's good enough. But I wanted to support modules that use localization, right? I actually think that localization is a really easy way for more users to use your software. And if you know how to make it easy to develop, it's a nice addition to getting more folks to kind of use your code. So this project is actually deployed under the PS inclusive GitHub org. I was also I'm a nerd. I have nothing better to do, and I decided I wanted to make this easier for myself because I often didn't know what the message we would give back to the user looks like unless I go in there. It might support Klingon if it's a supported UI. I don't know that I maybe that would be cool.
We'll need some testers for that. Sign up. Any Klingon
If
people
you
out
give
there?
me the UI, the culture UI code, we could test it. So part of this was my effort to try to vibe code something. I know enough TypeScript to be a little dangerous, but there's a lot of like boilerplate to really look at and set up. And so my first pass was like, all right, full vibe code. I'm just gonna give prompts, blank repo, go. And the result was like garbage. It was extremely hard to read through. I couldn't follow what it was doing. And that's a huge problem if it's something you're gonna release. So what I did was I ended up switching to using the template that the VS Code docs suggest, and then from there using smaller prompts. Okay, like I need you to read this file. Look for PSM ones in your directory. And then the nice thing is each change was logically easier to understand rather than having to look at the whole thing. And so I was able to vibe code a portion of it. Um, Actually a significant portion of it. The nice thing is then I was able to apply my knowledge about PowerShell and then make changes that made it more efficient or maybe things that I didn't necessarily understand. So we'll switch over to demo. So in the Saki repository, we have in the PSM one, we call this import localized data. And what we do is we have a binding variable called MSGS, messages. And what it does is it's looking for this messages.psd one. So under the hood, it's going to look for a culture folder. So that's usually 2-letter, comma, 2-letter. So like ENUS. And what it does is it figures out like what's your current culture in your shell. And it will basically fall back to, I think it falls back to English if it's not available. But then it can use other languages if that's what your default is. So if we look at, let's look at the English one real quick. I think no default task, right, is maybe a thing that we might say. So if I'm writing localized data, I would have key equals, a value, and then that would get rendered inside my code. So actually, let's look for this one. Okay, so error task name does not exist. Actually, I'm totally winging this, so let's hope I don't blow it. Oh, nope. No messages. Okay, there it is. Okay. So we have this function that we want to check to see if this key exists. Of course. Let me go to a different one. Let me go to one I actually know that works instead of just winging it. Okay, so here it is in practice. Here we throw an error message. We say, hey, there's no default task. And before, if you were just reading this, like you wouldn't necessarily know what to look for. You're like, I know that this throws something, but I don't necessarily know what that looks like. What that does is it creates this decorator here that actually shows you what that text would be. Here's another one. Saki succeeded executing, whatever. With those commands, we can start to do things like, hey, I actually want to switch the UI culture and I want it to be ES US, right? And then I hit enter. And what it does is it switches. And then if you notice that it switched that code, that inline decorator pretty quickly. Wish I put a timer so I could figure out how long I'm going, but yeah, so then the nice thing is if you're writing for other languages or you need to make sure like things are showing up correctly, this makes it a little easier. We switch back over to I don't know why that didn't work. I'll dig into the architecture in a second, but all that code is available under PowerShell PS inclusive, like I mentioned, under the PowerShell localization. The module gets released, and you can download it, and you can kind of see examples. And again, most of this was vibe coded, but the major things that I really had to write myself were things like there's a where did I put it? Oh, it's not there. It's in resources, I believe. I wrote a parser. So what we have to do is I'll show you this in the architecture. It's better. When the extension loads, it loads when it detects that you have PowerShell code that you're looking at PowerShell code. The first thing we do is we check to see, are there any PSM1 files? Not only that, does it contain the line import localized data? If it does, then it kind of sends that back. If it doesn't, that's the end of it. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't keep rescanning. It only looks for changes to the PSM1. If it does detect a PSM1 file, what it does is then passes that file over to the localization parser. And what that does is it uses AST to look for that call, and then it extracts what the parameters it uses. So I have to do some magic to like walk back up in the code in case you use variables, but it tries to recreate that command. And what it does is it takes that data, outputs it to JSON, which VS Code can handle a little bit better, and then kind of puts that in memory. From there, you have these decorators that look for the variable that you set, and it says, hey, if I see this in that line, I'm going to go look to see if that key exists, and then draw it inline. There's also a provider for debugging, so if you do that in debugging, it would also render that. I took a lot of inspiration on the there's an inline decorator that Tyler wrote for debugging. So I actually started with this. And again, because I took passes at this while I was vibe coding, this was like the initial version was this. And then I realized, oh, I actually want to see this while I'm writing it. So I actually want to add the editor decorator. And so then I was like, oh yeah, take that info, but drop it in here. And so then it was able to figure that out. But again, there were pieces where it's like, it didn't really know how to parse the AST. It didn't know how to convert that back to JSON. It didn't necessarily know what were the other things? How to call PowerShell safely, right? So I execute. This has to shell out to PowerShell. So we detect if you have PowerShell in your path or if you have Windows PowerShell in your path, but it supports all of them. But yeah, I think that's it. I don't want to go over too much longer. I'll let folks. Yeah.
No, that's cool to see. I know you've teased the organization before, but it's cool to see you making some headway. I think we talked about it on a PowerShell Wednesday or a podcast as well, but
yeah,
awesome, man.
There's a couple other things we're working on there, making it easy to add localization. There's websites that make it super easy for anybody to come in and say, hey, that thing in English is this in Spanish or Chinese or German, right? And so adding that support where your end users can actually be the ones who submit the changes, and having that be automatic is like a really nice flow. So I'll probably do a write-up at some point when I get that done. But yeah, thanks.
Sweet. Thank you. And like I said earlier, if you're interested in contributing open source stuff, reach out. We're looking for some early adopters, and it's always fun to connect people with repositories that need help because it's kind of hard to get started if you don't know where to look. A lot of places to go. Gilbert, thank you. Next up.
Thank you.
Yeah, till next time, my friend. All right, next up, we have Sam. Welcome.
All right, thank you.
What are we talking about today?
I'm just going to be going through a lightning demo of a couple of functions from my PS pre-workout or the PowerShell pre-workout module. It's just honestly a collection of utilities, experiments, things that I use day to day to kind of make things a little faster and easier. And so this is some of my favorite ones that I use fairly often. And I'll start with get modules with update. This was driven just by some research that I was doing where I wanted to see which modules would be updated if I ran the update module command or update PS resource. And it looks kind of like import module if you don't specify the scope parameter. It's going to look in sort of a particular order to determine what is the latest version that you have installed in your user scope, current user, or all user scope. So the bulk of this is that logic to see what truly is the latest version that I have. And then you can see here, I wanted to not waste time in the demo, so I've already run the command here in my terminal. And in this case, I have 12 modules that have an update available online. It was kind of fun making a logic for this because I wanted to make sure that if I have a pre-release version installed, it'll look for pre-release versions only for that particular module of a newer pre-release or the same version but stable without the pre-release tag. So it'll look for updates there, but it won't look for pre-release of modules that do not already have a pre-release version installed. So keeping that kind of on the same path that I'm already working in. And this does return an object. My window's a little size weird right now, but you can see it returns information about the name of the module, and then a selection of properties from the PS module info object type. So once I have that, I can send that to the pipeline to get more information, or I can just do update PS resource or update module, or I can do specific ones if I want to. Actually, that was another part of my story. I wanted to be able to update modules, but exclude certain ones from that. So this would allow me to filter my output and say, I don't want to update the Microsoft.graph module yet for reasons. So I could filter this and then pipe the rest of it to update and be good to go. So it's not life-changing, but it's kind of fun, and it was a good exercise sorting out that logic. I got some good feedback from our friend Jeff just yesterday, actually. So I added some what's next on this one. I'll have to add a scope parameter. So if I or anyone else feels like just checking a module in a specific scope, that should be fairly straightforward to add. And then maybe add some more detail to what I'm putting out here. And I actually made a custom PowerShell format file for this. So can add whatever you want while still maintaining the same type in the background.
Clever.
Yeah, thanks. Let's move on to the next one. Keep it quick. I think this one may have been one of the first functions that I actually brought into my PS pre-workout module. And I've told this story a few places, but for the longest time, I would always forget the silly syntax to list environment variables in PowerShell. It was just one of those things that my brain always got stuck on. But I also learned one day that when you list your environment variables, it targets the process. Scope's not the right word, but I'll just use that. It uses the process target, not user, not computer. And there was a scenario where I needed to check my user variables or my machine variables specifically. So I dove in and I wrote this function, and I'll actually run it in here. It's side note, working in a polyglot notebook here, and it's really interesting. It gives you very different outputs when you get objects in a polyglot notebook. And I don't actually mind. It's kind of neat how it does that. But to see what it looks like in the actual terminal, I'll just paste that in there. So here I can see the name of the variable, what target it's in, and if it's in a process target, you see the process ID and name, and then the value. I can do a couple other examples here, and it supports patterns, wildcard matching, and things like that in the variables. So path is a fun one. I can pipe it because we're getting an object to look for a specific one in a specific scope. And this isn't just about path, but path can be interesting because you might have a different path for your machine than you do for current user. And then of course we have set an environment variable. So I run that and I'll just use my shortcut because it's kind of a long function name. I'll just do GEV and I can use my positional parameter names or actually go for the name.
Can you make that text a little bit bigger on the right of the console?
I can, yes. What's that? Start plus? No.
Control
How
plus.
do I change that just in actual VS Code?
Just on the right. I don't remember. I'm a
Someone
control
in the
plus
chat probably
control
knows.
scroll up. Yeah, it's the one that
There
I
we
always
go.
forget. There you go.
Control plus it. All right. How's that?
Perfect.
All right. So basically my aliases to shortcut this are GEV or SEV to set environment variable. And I think the syntax is pretty straightforward. So an aside, I'm going to push Jake to talk about this someday because he's a new resident expert, but using enums make it easy to get autocomplete for things like the target. I don't have to actually code that. I'm just pulling from the .NET type of environment variable target. So that's that one. All right, my next one is another kind of a random yak shaving exercise. Again, I was working on a project. I had some objects that had a lot of properties and many of them were empty. So I know this might be good if you're doing with an Exchange Online mailbox or something like that. I don't have a great example handy right now, but here's one just that I could think of real quickly. So I run get service in Windows, and this has three empty properties. So this just lets me take any object and, oops, I don't need that. And then pipe any object to show without empty property. And please put in chat, I need a good short alias for this one. I haven't thought of one yet, so I'm taking suggestions. But it's going to show me all of the attributes except for the empty ones. And if you need it, you need it. If you don't, then it's boring, but a fun little project again. So keep that in mind if you have just kind of a digging into the attributes of any object, really. Last quick one is my own personal get command history one. And some of this functionality can be already handled if you do a PS readline handler. So you can actually do a PS readline handler that filters your command history, say it won't show any command that is less than 4 characters for certain commands. If you don't have that, maybe you want to do this. I built this function that does filter short ones, so CLS, LS, dir, whatever, aren't going to show up. But it makes it a little bit faster to search for commands where, like, I know I use the word module in a command. So I can do that, or I can do GCH module, and there's all my history with like the ones that I want. And then I can do, target it from there by the ID, and actually I'm going to shortcut that one. But so it's really just a quick way to find the history that I'm interested in. Or if I want to show my history without certain words, because maybe I tried syntax or something 13 times before I figured out the right way to do it. I don't know. I want to show my whole history without the words install, uninstall, and service. I have a filter for that as well. And it shows that history just for those items. It's the equivalent of doing the built-in get history command, or H, and then throwing a aware object after it. This is just saving me a step. So my next steps here for this one are, Jeff reminded me that my parameter names, I wasn't thinking when I made them, and I'm not really aligned with this typical PowerShell behaviors. So I did filter to exclude certain words where I should have actually used exclude on that one. So I need to realign some parameter names with the standard conventions. And I also noticed that my parameter set configuration wasn't allowing me to use the filter and the pattern things together. So I'm gonna have an update to fix that. But otherwise, that's another just basic command that I find kind of useful to look through what I've done in the past history.
Yeah, those are a lot of time savers, especially, I mean, really all of them in their own right, but I know early on get modules with update. I mean, that's kind of a pretty common challenge everyone who uses modules experiences.
Yep, especially with the graph module.
Oh yeah, especially. And
Yeah.
it's such a Jeff thing to do, by the way, to see a cool module and then actually give some helpful advice on it for, best practice and all that. I love that about Jeff.
It's always a blessing when I see a comment from him come in, because he's talked about it in his past visits to your podcast where he's transitioned from the code, and he's got the squishy bits. He talks about the squishy bits now, where we're past the syntax and the semantics, but what is the user experience of the person that's running your code, and what do they expect to come back from it, and how do they expect to use your code, your function? So I really love his comments, because I've slowly been learning to think that same way, and I think it really changes how useful these things are. So the more that we can get out in the software community, the better things will be.
For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Who do we have next? We actually have a special guest, a horse, as a matter of fact. Horse, also known as Jake Eldrith to some, but horse to many. Welcome.
Horse to many. Yes. Hello, Andrew. How are you today?
Good. Does your family know that you go by horse?
My wife kind of makes fun of me for it. Yeah.
It's taken
Especially because she knows the whole backstory, which I think I went into somewhere. I'm not going to give it away here. I think Gilbert knows it. I think Sam knows it. But yeah, it's a little embarrassing. So yeah.
We'll save it for another time. Well,
That's
what are you
right.
going to show us today, man?
Today, so I started up a internal PowerShell user group at Semperis where I work back in June, and this month I actually led, and we talked about style guide stuff, because we have no style consistency across all our various things, and I got a lot of really really experienced people in people that are like, oh yeah, I worked with the Monad shell while I was at Microsoft. It's like, okay, you've done PowerShell for a while, but when I was like whipping out VS Code and showing them stuff about why we do certain things certain ways, to make it easier for other people to use the code, blah blah blah, I kind of pulled out some things that I thought were pretty common knowledge in VS Code, and they were not, and kind of blew some minds. So I'm gonna show that stuff. So yeah, let's do it. The first thing was multiple cursors, because coming from some other editors, there's not multiple cursors available. I think that's kind of going away, but so what I mean by that, here I've got a list of a bunch of words. Some of them are real, some of them are maybe a little less real, but I want to convert that into an array, and it's very long, so I'm going to make it the vertical kind of style of an array, right? So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to change into vertical, right? So now, and that was just a find and replace, right? Found and replace the S or space S. Nothing special there. Now, what I used to do is I would go through here and I do one of these numbers, but yeah, exactly. But you can do multiple cursors. So on a Mac, I'm pressing down Option, Control, and then down. Right? And so now I have one big set of cursors. And now I can just type with this and kind of jump around, and saves a buttload of time. When working in these massive things, it can just be super, super useful. Or one thing that I commonly do is I'm like pulling something out of a SQL query and then converting it back to a single string. I want to deserialize, right? So I do like this, and then I can go boom and boom, and I've got a whole, or it's all serialized. So so we do that, right? And then that's multiple cursors. You can also, you won't see it because I'm not sharing out my whole screen, but you could change it so you can do like a command click or control click, depending on what operating system you're working with. Here we go. We're going to make this work a little better. So let's go ahead and turn this into an actual array. So this is an array, right? And now we're going to show what automatic formatting is, which also, like, I'm going to be honest with you. I only discovered this like 4 months ago. And now all the time, type something in and I hit Alt-Shift-F, right? Is that right? Yeah, Shift-Alt-F. Or you could do it from your command palette, etc. Format document. If you're wondering why I have that stuff on my screen that's showing what I'm doing, that is the screencast mode. I don't remember who showed that, but that just recently too. Very, very cool way to just show what you are typing to people that are using it or viewing. I see like you're going to say something, Andrew.
I mean, I'm loving this stuff. This is right up my alley. These are all the huge time savers. And part of why having VS Code in your tool belt is worth the investment, short-term and long-term, because you're going to have you need somebody on your team who knows about multiple cursors. I'll tell you that right now. It's just such a time saver potentially.
I don't remember why I learned about it, but it was another dev. Whose name is Dev. I'm not messing with you. He has taught me so much about development. But he's like, oh, you can have multiple cursors. Well, what does that mean? And he shows me. I'm like, oh, that's how you're creating these gigantic lists of stuff in no time at all. So yeah, that does that. So that's automatic formatting. It's really the reason that these have really come across my plate a lot more recently too is because I've been working with other people's code where they are following older kind of formats or older styling, etc. And one that really got me is this aliases, right? So Andrew, you get to tell me, what's this doing?
I don't know. I just see a for each object. I know there's that.
Yeah.
Child
GCI, your
item.
baby.
All right, you can get some files, pipe it through, and GP.
Look at that.
Process form. I don't know what GP is.
Get item property. So, handing this off to somebody else, right? I don't know all the aliases. I know a lot of the folks in the chat use aliases all the time. I don't ever. I learned from the beginning to just like go with the full command name. So, but because I'm using other people's code now and working with it more frequently, I'm coming across these aliases. We could just tell using the PowerShell extension to replace aliases with their alias name. I'm going to go ahead and just format and boom. Now everything's there. Super easy to read, super easy to pass off to somebody else and they can understand what's going on. So yeah, those three things seriously in the last month, just been showing those to people and blowing their minds. So
blew some more here today.
Much more lightning than the earlier folks. I think I made it 3 minutes?
Something like that. But hey, it's a great example of like, we want to see the little things you discover. You find a little module that helps you in some way that may have existed for a long time. Like all these features you showed have existed for a really long time, but we don't know everything. It's great to discover hidden features of things like PowerShell or VS Code or what else you have in your repertoire. So
it was funny in that user group just recently with all these old heads. being like, oh yeah, I still work in ISE. I'm like, man, I get it. But come join us in VS Code. It really will just make your life so much better.
Yeah. At some point in the journey, it makes sense to make the switch. If you're super early on, first couple times running it, it's all good. When you get to the point where you're writing scripts, it's just a beneficial thing to have in your tool belt outside of PowerShell. Within PowerShell, there's many cases to be made, but even outside of it, like to take your thing to the next level, it is going to be helpful. Like the stuff Morton is showing, it always helps to dive to the next level.
Absolutely. And when you can do these things and, save yourself so much time, then you can dig into those deeper things.
And secure your environment. Hey,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you to everybody who joined us today for PowerShell Wednesday. Every single Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. We're here. If I'm on vacation.
Wait a second.
What's up?
You said PowerShell Wednesday every single Tuesday.
Oh my gosh, did I? Yeah, it's actually PowerShell Wednesday on Wednesdays. Thank you. Thank you for that. You could have let that roll and I would have never had a clue. I thought that was perfect there. But yeah, it's actually on Wednesdays. That's where the Wednesday and PowerShell Wednesday comes from.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I just relearned that apparently. Yeah. And join us on the PDQ Discord, discord.gg/PDQ. We're always talking PowerShell, having fun. A lot of people growing in their PowerShell journeys, and we're happy to share it with you. So we'll see you there. See you next week for PowerShell Wednesday. Stevie Coaster is going to be talking to us about an app he built with PowerShell Universal. See you there.